Get this show on the road. Sweet. Oh, we're at 80. Okay. So thank you everyone for being here. We're going to start at 5 after the hour just to give everybody an opportunity to log in. It looks like people are logging in at we're already at 88. Just so everybody knows, I'm Vincent Medley, the Maddie's Human Animal Support Services Project Director. And so, like I said, we will start the webinar in 5 after the hour. For those of you that are just logging on, I am Vincent Medley, the Maddie's Human Animal Support Services Project Director. We are going to start. We're giving everybody an opportunity to log on. We had 400 registrations for this webinar, or over 400. And so I want to give everybody an opportunity to log in before we get started. So we will start at 5 after the hour, just to give everybody an opportunity to log in. Just preliminarily, thank you for being here. And I'm really excited. I think you're gonna enjoy today's webinar. It is 5 after, and we want to make sure we got a lot of content to go through and a lot of discussion. So I'm going to start. I know people are still logging in. And so thank all of you for being here. My name is Vincent Medley. I am the Maddie's Human Animal Support Services Project Director. And I've been in this position since late September. So thank you all for being here. Have an exciting webinar this afternoon. Most people may not think that, or I think the conventional wisdom is numbers are not exciting, but I can promise you today's numbers will be extremely exciting for you. So without further ado, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Human Animal Support Services Project, what we're all about, why we're here. For those of you that are new, some of you have heard this before, so please pardon my repetition, but I think it's important that our folks that are joining us and people who may not have heard that are new hear what we're all about. And so our project, the Human Animal Support Services Project, is the purpose of it is to transform the industry, which is animal services, from an isolated system to a true member of the human services network. And we do that by supporting community-based programs and programs that support humans, as well as those, because we know that the outcomes for animals are going to improve if the outcomes for humans improve. And we do this by, and this is why this webinar today is so important, is by testing and measuring community-centered programs. We have 20 plus pilot shelters, that pilot organizations that we work with, which is our testing ground, our proof of concept, our where we take our ideas and our programs to test to see how they work. Because we have industry sourced solutions, and those solutions come from the industry. They come from all of you. I mean, they come from the people, and the Human Animal Support Services Project is all about the people. We work with all of you people, everybody on this call, the industry as a whole, and that we have connection with and partner with, to identify national trends, and also that are having an effect on the local shelters. And that helps us discover new ways that work, and then also old ways, traditional ways that also work, and combine those to help you become, to facilitate that open dialogue, and that the implementation of ideas that create those better outcomes and preserve the human-animal bond. And it's important because it's sourced by all of us. We don't pretend to know all the answers. We definitely are committed to working with the industry as a whole to facilitate the answer. So once again, like I said earlier, today's webinar is unleashing the power of data. We, as a whole, our data team, we call it our research and development team. I have some really special guests that can introduce themselves. But what I will say is this: as part of our project, we work with 22 pilot shelters. Those organizations, they cover the range from animal services, government shelters, to nonprofits that have contracts with government shelters, and nonprofits that are standalone nonprofits that don't have a contract, but then work and partner closely with the government shelter. So the Human Animal Services Project, we use a combination of programs, data collection, and insights from our work with our pilot organizations to find solutions to some of the industry's most pressing and longstanding issues or problems. And as always, we're sourced by you, the people that are doing the job every day, because we stand for you, and we also stand together with you. So as far as data, it's, data is the bedrock, and it for somebody like me that worked at 4 of the largest shelters in the country, for some of the largest shelters in the country in big cities, I wasn't able to really help lead the way I wanted to lead and transform our shelter until I understood data and why it was important. And so whether the data is collected by you or by the shelter that you are part of, or aggregated data from a national standpoint, or like, for instance, shelter animals counts or HAPRI, data is extremely important to help you identify and solve problems. And not only just looking at the data, but turning that data into information that will have you make those programmatic changes that address the issues that you see, or to make improvements for things that are already working in your shelter. So without further delay, I will allow my panel of experts in the data field to introduce themselves. And then what we'll do, just so everybody knows, is there'll be a presentation, and it'll be the presentation will be it'll be a conversational style of presentation. So it'll be a little bit different, but I think it'll be engaging for all of you to hear and enjoy the conversation and the dialogue. Please put your questions in the chat if you'd like. We're going to answer questions during the presentation, but then we'll also have a Q&A after the presentation. So without further delay, I will open up the floor to our panel.
So I'll get started. I'm Maggie Lynch. I'm the Senior Director for Research and Development at Austin Pets Alive. And my key function right now is overseeing the data team for Haas, because we have a lot of work to do. And reporting to me, and sort of the hub for our analysis of the implementation of Haas, is Amanda Foster, who will introduce herself next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Foster. I'm the Assistant Director of Implementation Analysis here at Haas, and I primarily work with the pilot shelters and oversee the data team that is working with the pilot shelters. One of them is Kate.
Hello all, I am Kate McHugh-Westfall. I am an embedded data and implementation coordinator with the project. My main function is working hand in hand with our pilot shelters, collecting qualitative and quantitative data, helping them come up with implementation solutions, and really giving support on troubleshooting the challenges we in the shelter world all face every day.
All right, we can go to the next slide.
Yes, yeah, you're ready. You're ready, Amanda? Okay, I'll let you.
All right, next slide. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today, I just want to quickly show some national intake trends that we're seeing. We like to make sure that we're keeping an eye on national trends as it relates to our pilot shelters. You can see that lost and stray pets and owner surrenders make up the highest % of intake for shelters on a national scale. You can go to the next slide, Erin. And our pilot shelters are seeing similar trends. So we like to think of them as kind of a sample of what may be happening in other areas. And I just like to point that out as we start to look at this data. Next slide. So we're going to focus primarily on lost pet reunification today, because we had a lot of things we wanted to talk about, Vincent, but we had to fit it all into an hour. So we decided let's focus just on lost pets and finder behavior, since that is making up the biggest percentage of intake across shelters. And as shelters are experiencing crisis right now, we thought that might be a good time to focus on this topic. So two main things that I want to point out that we'll dive into a little bit more in this presentation is that finders, when we asked finders in our pilot shelters if they were willing to hold on to lost pets longer with support from the shelter, 1 out of 3 people said yes. We also found that more than half of people were not looking around the area or attempting any other method of reunification prior to bringing a pet to the shelter. And those are really important, because we have a study that also showed that 70% of pets that go into a shelter as stray and then are returned home later were found within a mile of their home. 42% were just a block away from their home when they were picked up and brought in. And so that just makes this really important, because we have the community bringing in pets that might just be less than a mile from home. And then we have people who aren't looking around the area, and we have people who are willing to hold on to those pets longer with support from the shelter.
And can I chime in on that too, Amanda?
Yeah.
Like, so for instance, from a field, or at least from a shelter level, this also is a way for you to look at your data and say, you know what, as a pet owner, one of the first things you can instruct a pet owner to do, whether it's through your website or if they call 311 or if they call directly into your shelter, is the first thing you can do to find your pet is to drive around the neighborhood to see if your animal is lost in the neighborhood. And I think a lot of times we skip that step. In fact, I was on a conversation this week where we talked about that. And I think it's really important to really be basic with our, especially when we talk about, helping not to skip the owners, to educate the owners on how they go about finding their animal.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we're focused on finder behavior here, but there's also an opportunity to reach owners as well.
I think for both of these points, a big takeaway is that people really do want to help. And we have to be the ones giving them the resources to make sure they can help in the best way. More than half of the people thought bring them to the shelter is the best thing to do. No matter, maybe it's across the city, maybe it's their neighbor's pet, we don't know. So making sure people have the resources they need, the information they need, and are kind of steered in the right direction to be the best helpers they can be, because that's what people want to be. If they're coming to the shelter, it means they want to help that animal, and giving them tools to do that the best way is something that we were really excited to see. That would be an opportunity here.
Yeah, and and just think about it, just from a common sense, practical standpoint. With if the shelter is across town, but the owner of that pet is down the street, what do you think would be more convenient, and the person would rather do? Would they rather drive down the street to get that animal back to their owner, or drive across town? So in a lot of cases, there's ways people are making the effort, and it's just a matter of working with them on what efforts they can make that are even takes less of their time and commitment.
All right, we can move on to the next slide there. So the next part of this presentation or discussion is that we're going to talk about 4 things that you could start doing in your shelters right now with their lost stray pet and intake data in 2023. And they all go back to these key findings around lost pets. But these are things you could start doing right now. The main thing, or the first thing, is to start tracking field versus over-the-counter stray intakes. We are seeing in a lot of shelters that stray intakes are being tracked, but they're all combined together and we can't pull them apart very easily. But this could be really important to you as you are thinking about, how do I want to engage the community? Knowing where those strays are coming in, if it's field versus over the counter, could really change what that program could look like. One way to track that is subtypes. It doesn't have to be a subtype. We just know that that's a really easy, reportable field for you to be able to quickly see how many are coming in over the counter from the public and how many are coming in from the field. Vincent, if this, oh, go ahead.
Before we go on, we wanted to sort of clue you in what we're doing here, because we just showed you some very high level findings that we derived from the analysis of what was happening in house shelters. But one thing we learned when we were doing our study of what was going on in the house shelters, and as we were analyzing the data and looking into it, what it means is that we often realized that we didn't know what it means, the quantitative data, what it really meant, until we started looking at the context in which it was coming from. So we have spent a lot of time looking at the ground reality of where these quantitative results are coming from, because we really want to situate it in the qualitative reality that's there. And so what these slides are keying all of you in to do is to not simply take our results and just apply them wherever you are without really thinking about them, but to really consider your community and what ways that you operate, what policies might free you to do things or bar you from doing things that we recommend, or what things about the way that you operate give you the greatest opportunity. And so we're asking you to take this data and think about it a little bit to get the most power out of it for yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Maggie. Thank you for pointing that out. It's all about understanding the community and fitting your solutions to what is individual and unique about your community when we're talking about these data points. All right, the next slide. The second data point that we suggest that you start to look at is found location data for stray pets. So that is specifically addresses or intersections, as opposed to in the finder's backyard, at the store near the lake, the third stop sign on the left after McDonald's. We want it to be really clean data that you can use. If you can't type it into your GPS on your phone, then you can't use it to understand your data. So found location data can be used in a lot of different ways, and we're going to talk about some of those today. But one of the most popular ways is to visualize in a heat map so that you can understand where strays are coming in, and also pair it with census data. So not just zip codes, because we know that those could be taking up, going over a large space in your community, but zip addresses and intersections is going to be the most useful kind of data. Erin, go ahead to the next slide. So this slide here is one of my favorites. It is a really great example of the heat maps that we are building for our host pilot shelters, but these are things you could do for your shelters as well. All of the red dots are indicating addresses or intersections where pets were picked up, lost pets, and you can really see where those where strays are coming from. And shelters are able to like zoom in and get really in the weeds with this data. And some of the really cool things that we've seen shelters doing with this data are things like targeting microchip clinics in areas where a lot of stray pets are being picked up. We're seeing shelters look at census data and find out what languages are being spoken the most in those communities so that they can put out marketing materials that are in Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, and really reach all of their community with solutions for lost pets.
Want to add on this one. I think I always like to think about data pieces like this and the way we look at data kind of as a treasure map, where something like this, on a treasure map, it's X marks the spot, and that's where you want to dig. Pieces of information like this are that X on there. So for found locations, you can, if you dig into that information, it's really going to help you find a solution for you, because every community is going to be different. Every shelter is going to be different. One shelter that needs, resources in multiple languages might also have a shelter that needs marketing materials, a shelter that there's no public transportation options from the highest, stray intake zip codes to the shelter. So that could be a free ride home program. So this is really kind of that dig point for your data to find a solution that works for you, but it can all come out of the same general overall data collection processes. So it's I think one of the coolest things about this data is that it can really be a starting point for you to find your specific solution that really can apply to everyone, all types of organizations, big, small, rural, urban, everywhere.
Yeah, I love that, Kate. I love thinking of this as a treasure map. That's awesome.
I have a comment and I also have a question that is from our Q&A. My first comment is a heat map is so important, especially for those of you in leadership positions, to use in your presentations and to show your decision makers on why certain areas or why certain programs that you want to have implemented are important. And this just tells the story as long as you have the right data collected. And then the question there's two questions. One, are we going to see any 2022 data today, Amanda?
We shared some of our key findings at the beginning there from our lost pet data. We do have a ton of other data we'd love to come back with at another time, Vincent.
Sweet. Okay. And also, can you elaborate as to why you've seen it useful to distinguish between stray field and stray over-the-counter intakes? What has that distinction allowed y'all to do with the data?
Yeah, so understanding where strays are coming in from field versus over the counter, there's a lot you can do with that. We've seen some shelters finding that if they have a lot of pets coming in from the field, and then they look at their policies, maybe they can't, maybe if somebody gets called to go pick up an animal, they have to bring that pet to the shelter. And if they're seeing that most of their strays are coming from the field, it might be more of a question of policy change or speaking to leaders in the community about those sorts of things versus over the counter, which might point to opportunities to engage finders of these pets firsthand and offering them solutions and ways and asking them to be part of the solution.
Yeah, and part of that answer that Amanda gave points to another major use for our data. When we started, we thought it was going to be mainly used to develop programs and learn from them and refine them and then do them again and refine them some more. So we thought it was all going to be about the implementation of programs. But what we're finding as we work with the host shelters is that often we will recommend an activity to them and find that they can't do it because they're barred by law or by policy locally. And so we also have a policy team on the host team. And the policy team tells us that the most useful thing you can do if you want to change a policy is provide data to the people who are advocating for the policy. And so that has become another major function of the data team. We have done this where we will provide the data to our policy team and our policy team will go to the community where a policy might be changed and show the shelter there how you use that information to go to your local authorities and say, here's this data. This data shows that there is a benefit if we want to change this policy, and this proves it. And we can even calculate costs for shelters. We're getting such rich and detailed data because we are looking at animal level data from 22 shelters. We have millions of fields of data in our data warehouse, and we can make any kind of inquiry into that data and generate all kinds of analyses. And so we're finding a broader and broader use for our data. We also use it for communications planning, and we use it for things like helping shelters as they change their operations to do more community-centered sheltering to figure out what's the most effective way to use our budget and our staffing.
And a quick comment from Brett Kruger. Another thought is you might be able to do in-field returns if a lot of your stray intake are coming from field staff. Though I will say this, Brett, and thank you for putting that in there. The field officers are probably the most powerful outreach program in our industry if we use them properly, because they're the ones that are out. They see the problem at its origin and they're able to address the problem. But we've got to empower them with the authority and the training to do field returns. But yeah, that's a really powerful tool. Thank you, Brett.
There's also a question from Ron Britton in the chat about emergency response. Can you see that one? Vincent? Or Ron, do you want me to read it?
I do see it. In your community analysis, do you also happen to know how shelter resources factor into local emergency response planning? Is it left up to shelters to independently come up with response options, shelter by shelter, or has the community planned including shelters and options?
See, many of us know the answer to that question.
You know, I think part of the answer to that question is a lot of data, and the more you learn about what you need in your community or ideas that you have that might help, you're going to be able to craft the way you collect data based on what you think your overall needs are. There's a lot that we'll talk about, and I think we'll talk a little bit about community surveying, but that's another way to do it. And then also being able to collect through if you have a 311 system, community needs. But yeah, I don't think that's something that people are currently doing, and I do think it's something that would be really valuable.
I do think I heard recently, Vincent, that communities, not shelters, are tasked with this. That they're required. It became a law after Hurricane Katrina, when there was no plan for pets. I'm not positive about this, but I do think it's the community's responsibility. And but what's happening is some communities are not planning very well. Their line in the community response for pets is the shelter will jump in and take care of pets. That's basically.
Yeah.
But one thing that Haas is doing in 2023 is we haven't had an offer to partner with the Red Cross and to have some influence over what's happening with the planning of for pets in emergency response. So that will be rolling out this year. So if that's happening, we will have templates and we'll be able to offer that widely throughout the country.
And there is one more question in the Q&A. Oh, you already answered that, Amanda, or are you?
Oh, no, I can answer it.
Okay.
The question is, how do you synthesize, create reports from the data produced by your shelter pilot program? Do you use a specific database? That is a great question, Lauren. So we actually have a data team that is working, like Kate here, who's working directly with the shelters and getting reports from the shelter software, and also getting a lot of qualitative data from the hands-on support that she's giving to give context to our analysis. We have a lot of places where we're getting data directly from the shelters. We have Pets.Find Help, where we're starting to collect community data. I hope that answers your question.
Well, maybe Kate can go through our process where we start with the monthly reports and we go to our warehouse and then to dashboards.
Yeah, so we do have animal level data that we collect monthly, and we have an internal data warehouse and some data analysts that know much more about the back end of that data management than I do. Our tech wizards or programming wizards, and they, whereas I work in the staff-facing side, so I work with the folks actually in the shelter and work with them on getting the context to their data. Our database side works with the more programming side, formula side, to really analyze that data, and then we create reporting dashboards, but we do it all in-house. And we try to create solutions, reporting solutions that are easier for our pilot shelters to get that data and utilize it quickly. Because we hear all the time, I'm sure you've said it before, that you'd love to be able to dig into this data and look at it. And, create all sorts of formulas in your spreadsheet, but who has the time? And the data team has the time. So that's what we have been doing. But we are working on we are working in-house with our pilot shelters on making some, fast and easy reporting for them. And one of the things we do is try to make solutions for the greater animal welfare community also to help you all. Because it's hard. It takes a lot of time.
So Kate, we have a follow-up question. By in-house, do you mean Excel or via programs such as Tableau, Looker? And I can help with that a little bit.
I can answer that question.
Yes, actually, Amanda is the best person to answer that question.
So Brandy, we get the data from the shelter softwares. We put it through a mapping process into BigQuery, and then we pull it back out into Tableau.
Right, and so when Amanda says she's pulling it back out from BigQuery, she's talking about our data warehouse. It's not anything like an Excel spreadsheet. It's a way of storing data where, because we're pulling data from 22 different shelters, and every one of them reports data differently. They have different fields. They use different software. They've got PetPoint, Chameleon, Shelter Love, Shelter Buddy. They call things different things when they label their fields. And so if we are going to be able to aggregate that data, pull it together into one collection and sort of take a view on what's happening with the Haas implementation overall, and we have to take those fields of data and map them into a consistent set of fields shared across the data for all 22 shelters. And then we're able to pull it into one massive data set, and then we can query it and pull it into Tableau to show visualizations of that data, which is what Amanda does.
And something that makes the way we work with our shelters unique is that, part of my job is being the person that goes to our pilot shelters and says, this intake type, owner surrender, subtype, KPWF, does that mean temporary boarding? And they say, yes, it does. And so we can categorize things, we can standardize things on our side, because our data coordinators, embedded data coordinators like myself, can work with the shelters one-on-one to make sure that, even if they are, collecting their data in a very unique way to them, we can make sure that everyone, we can kind of get the background on that to make sure everyone has a consistent, it's looked at consistently in our analysis.
Mm-hmm. These are great questions. Let's move on to we have two more data points to go over and some other findings to share. And I will let you take this one, Kate.
Yes, so this is a passion area for me. So something we were noticing, all shelters really are seeing if animals do have microchips. It's generally part of processes, but are not doing much with that data after that fact. And we saw a lot of potential in that. So we helped our pilot shelters set up data tracking to see if what animals were microchipped when they come into the shelter and what weren't. We really wanted to know what effect it was having on our return to home. And we found, for the shelters that started tracking it, we found some really exciting numbers. 2.5 times more dogs with microchips were returned to home than without in some preliminary numbers. And it was 10 times that amount with cats, which is crazy. So we were very excited to see that. So our pilot shelters have started tracking animals that come in with microchips. And it's giving us a lot of exciting information. We can see where areas in communities where microchip prevalence are. Again, that found location data mapping is a great pair, because you can see, if there's a community that has a ton of animals coming in without microchips, it can lead you to maybe doing some community outreach or microchips clinics there. If there is a community that's coming in with microchips, and maybe you decide to also track people who have or animals that have microchips that the people decline picking them up, you can target that. There's so many different things you can do with this information, and it really helps you target. We know that microchips are so important for return to home, And this, again, it's that giving you that X data to dig deeper, your dig spot, to really dig in there for information that's going to help you address the specific issues of your shelter. Or
All right, next slide. So the fourth piece of data that we think that you should start tracking in 2023, and this goes back to our key findings that we'll expand on a little bit here, is finder data. So about collecting data about the behavior of people in your community that are bringing lost pets in. And this is specifically for over the counter, although you could apply this in the field as well. So if you want to go to the next slide. And since I know we're running short on time, so let's just dive right into the questions. You can go to the next one. So if you're wondering what you should start asking and collecting information on, one good question you could ask your community as they're bringing in lost pets is, did you look around the surrounding area before bringing this pet in? Lifeline, which is one of our pilot shelters, used the location data and their stray over-the-counter and field data to find out specifically in Atlanta how far away are found pets from their home, to educate the community around what they could be doing. Next slide. Kate, did you have something to add there?
yeah, I just two pieces of that last slide that I really thought were genius of them. They also use their location tracking data. Those ads were put actually in bus stops and
That's
bus
right.
shelters, and they use their location stray and lost pet animal location data to market and put those ads in those communities and neighborhoods that were where their lost pets were coming from, which I just thought was so smart.
Yeah, that's awesome. The second question you could start asking is, what methods did you try to find the owner before bringing this pet in? And this can give you a lot of information. We found when we were asking members of the pilot communities, most often we were seeing that people were posting and searching on lost and found social media groups, regardless of species. That was the most common across all of the aggregated data, and getting microchips scanned and looking around the surrounding areas were less common. But I will say that this did vary quite a bit by the individual community. So finding out what's happening in your community is really important here. And you can use this in two different ways. The first one will show you what is already familiar to your audience and to your community, so that you can really lean into it. And so if you're also finding that social media groups is where finders are posting and searching first, that's a great thing to lean into and push out to your community for both finders and owners. If you're finding that microchip scanning just isn't happening a whole lot, then that's a great thing to address in your community. Start really pumping out the messaging around getting microchips scanned before bringing them to the shelter. And our last question on the next slide. The third question you could start asking your community is, would you be willing to hold on to this pet until an owner or new owner is found? And the important part is you have to be willing to offer support if you're going to start asking this question or offering it as an option. We found that 1 in 3 people, like we said at the beginning, had said yes, that this was a great and this outlines a great opportunity to get lost pets home without them having to stay at the shelter, either through reunification efforts, through rehoming if reunification doesn't happen, and building out your foster program as well. And that's our last one. If you want to go to the last slide. We do have more data coming soon from our 2022 findings. Like I said, we had a lot to choose from, and so we decided to really hone in on lost and found today, but we have more that we can't wait to come and share with you all and talk about. Owner surrender data being a big topic, and then data from beyond the shelter. out in the community through pets.findhelp.com and understanding where the gaps are. Vincent, I'll hand it back over to you.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them. Oh, I see the questions in the Q&A. I also see one of my friends, Rachel Kreisler, Dr. Kreisler. Hello. She says QGIS is similar to ArcGIS, but free and open and an open source. But let's queue up some questions. So Leanne asks, hi, involved in rescues and community groups here, networking and reunification. If we have folks like me who want an affordable but reliable chip scanner to carry on their own, can you recommend which? And then example, many of the Amazon don't scan Avid chips, etc. Thinking of making a stray kit or for folks, cars, blankets, bowls, water, treats, scanner, etc.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. I do not have a chip scanner recommendation personally.
I do not either, but I know anytime someone wants to ask a question that I don't know the answer to, I tell them to go in our American Pets Live Facebook group, if you have Facebook, and ask the question there. I look there to say, oh, what are people suggesting? So there are a lot of folks with a lot of great knowledge about that stuff in that group. So I would recommend going there.
Well, and also, when you do buy a microchip scanner, make sure that scanner says that it's a universal scanner. When you buy it, it generally scans a number of different chips. The universals sometimes don't scan certain chips, but most of the time they scan all of them. All right. Okay. Next from Nicole, are you advocating for finders not to bring, let me see that. Are you advocating for finders not to bring any animals to the shelter? Which pets would be eligible for this type of program?
That is a great question, Nicole. So we are not saying that no animal should come to the shelter. This is about healthy, friendly pets, not the ones that really, truly need intervention. And so I'm glad that you asked that because that's an important distinction here. This is relating specifically to those healthy, friendly pets that just need to go back home, not the ones that need medical or behavioral intervention, not those that are in immediate danger or causing any immediate danger.
That's very important to, and so Emma asked, are you going to release a report of the data you put together for 2022 or will it all be in webinars like this?
Maggie or Vincent, what do you say about that?
We're planning a series of webinars over the year. We like them to be interactive. And actually, if any of you want to write in and make suggestions about how these could be better for you, we'd love it. We want these to be really useful to you. There's going to be an email I think in the next slide where you can write in and make suggestions about that. We do produce quite a lot of reports, but we report to the house shelters, but maybe we got to think about a more public report. The reports to the house shelters are only to them because we have agreements with them that we won't publicize their data. You all know that can be a very sensitive topic for everybody. So that's a suggestion we'll consider.
And we do work with, well, and Amanda, maybe you can kind of illuminate the group on, the national data that we do collect and how we look at, just from a general standpoint.
Beyond our pilot shelters, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, like we work, just the data we look at from, from national organizations that collect data.
So we do work with Shelter Animals Count, and we have a coalition through them where we're collecting a lot of partner organization data as well.
Sweet. Yep. And Dr. Chrysler asks, are you considering submitting any manuscripts based on this data to the Journal of Shelter Medicine and Community Animal Health?
That is a long-range plan, Rachel. Our R&D department started in October with me becoming the director of it, and it's not fully fleshed out yet because I've been mainly focused on the Haas group. But yes, eventually we are publishing some data, not our Haas data, but some related research, including the study we cited about how far lost pets tend to be away from their homes at the Frontiers open access platform. We have a group of articles there that are produced in relation to Haas. And again, if you use our email address there, we can send you the link directly to that set of articles.
Sweet. Nicole asked another really great question, which is for shelters who are looking to turn into an action plan, turn data into an action plan, what suggestions do you have for just some basic steps?
The first thing I would recommend is looking at what is your shelter's goals. So you should be really focusing on the data points that are specific to your shelter's KPIs. So if you look at, I would recommend as a first step, just look at your intake and outcome groups and trends and see what you can learn from that. So if you're seeing that a lot of lost pets are coming in, like we were seeing in our aggregated data, or if it's a lot of owner surrenders, that would be the first step. And then pairing your solution and what you want to prioritize for data back to the main metrics that are important to your organization. I know that that's a little vague, but that's where I would start.
And are any of Lauren asked, are any of your pilot shelters ones where rescue has a contract to run the county shelter? Do you have any insights into this type of shelter? The short answer to that is yes. We have a couple of different models, one where they only do intake for the Animal Services Agency, and then also ones that actually have contracts with Animal Services agencies. So yeah, we do have some insights, Lauren, and if you'd love, for us to give you some more details, I will put my email in the chat for you to send any questions you have about that. And then our last, one more question we have is from Brandy. Are your pilot shelters connected to the Petco Love Lost database?
Yes, some of them are.
I had a meeting with Petco Love Lost, and they presented to our Haas pilot directors, and we are talking to them next week. We're talking to their data analysts.
Well, it looks like we are, if anybody has any other questions, so number one, I wanted to thank the panel for being part of this. You guys were fabulous. And do you have any last insights before we log off? Or any last advice, anything that you want the audience to walk away with? If not, that's fine, but we have
just at a high level, start using your data to make decisions that can tell you a whole lot about what's happening in your shelter and in your community. And also give us some feedback. What do you want to hear us talk about? We have a lot of data, and sometimes it's about asking the right questions. So what are the questions?
I would echo everything Amanda says, and I would also say, don't be afraid of your software. Don't be afraid to ask them for what you need. Don't be afraid to dig into their help functions. There's so much you can do, and there's so much that if you want it, ask for it and see what they can do for you. Don't think it can't exist just because you haven't seen it yet.
And, I would say, there's a saying, oh, we have another question in the Q&A. Oh, that is just excellent presentation. Thank you, Ron. It's one of those things where, you don't know how to use the numbers until you decide what you want to use them for. And then it's all about the numbers. And so this is one of the really great ways to take a look at your programs and also your processes and make decisions based on analytical data. And I would just give anybody advice, please just start somewhere, but then also leverage especially government shelters, leverage the internal resources within your government to help you with data analysis, because a lot of times you'll be able to get information or get analytical personnel from within your government. And if not, figure out a way to hire somebody to handle your data. If that's a possibility within your, because this really is one of the most powerful tools to help can keep animals and pets together. I mean, humans and pets together.
And volunteers. There are a lot of volunteers in your community that would be willing to help with this. If you have some data experts in your community, this might be a really fun project for somebody to answer some of these questions. And it might be more fun than their day job, even in some cases. So definitely reach out to your community and see what kind of data experts you have that would be willing to help.
Yeah, and we, here in Austin, I live in Austin, and we have a university here, and there are frequently students who need projects, and some of them are doing really advanced data analytics and have produced some really, really great work for us, and they do it for free. You have to work with their student schedule. You have to give them a lot of guidance about what your goal is, but the outcome of that can be really, really powerful. I did notice a lot of comments about using free software and not having the ability to use things like Tableau. So those are some of the short-term solutions that you can have. But one last thing I will say is you can't do good analytics if you don't have good data. And we have seen in a lot of shelters that people really struggle with their frontline staff getting their data recorded well and consistently. And until you can conquer that, the analytics only come next.
Yep.
But the benefit is enormous.
Yeah, Maggie, I'm glad that you said that. And I think all of you know I could talk for an hour just on that topic alone. But when Maggie says clean data, she means go look and see like your location data. Are you actually entering addresses and street intersections? When you are entering any free form text fields that you want to be able to pull information from, is it entered in a standardized way? When you're entering intake types that are for a certain, like if it's, we see this one all the time, dead on arrival being DOA in parts of the data, and then it's disposal, and then it's dead on arrival, and just makes trying to get any information out of that difficult. So like lean into standardization, and it will make understanding your data so much easier.
All right. Wow, that was excellent. One last note, especially if you use volunteers, make sure that you can preserve the integrity of your data and it doesn't escape outside of your shelter. So you got to have trusted people, and you got to have policies and training around that really helps secure to where that information stays as anonymous, or not anonymous, but as protected as possible, especially for those things that you are still needing to work through before you publish. But this is great. I mean, I'm so glad that everybody got to see our team. And I'm so happy that all of you came. We do plan to have more of these webinars with more findings, and also have an industry perspective on it as well. But thank you all. I appreciate you. And be on the lookout for an email about our next webinar, which will be coming up. We have 2 this coming month in March. So just be on the lookout for that. And thank you, everybody. Have a great evening, and we will talk soon.